"Your son owes me $3 million, said Harold Whitman, my former father-in-law, as he pushed the court documents across the polished mahogany desk. "And I'll destroy his reputation if I don't get every penny." I was sitting in the most expensive law office in Chicago, staring at the man who had kicked me out of the family Christmas 25 years ago. His hair was now completely white, but he had the same look of superiority that had haunted me since 1998. $3 million. I asked calmly, pretending not to know exactly what he was talking about. "Your son's medical technology company used Whitman Industries patents. We have complete documentation." Harold adjusted the knot of his Hermes tie, the same arrogant gesture as always. "Jordan will pay, or I'll make sure he never works in this industry again." My name is Demetrius Johnson, and at 52, I never imagined I would be sitting face to face with a man who called me that thing in front of his wife, children, grandchildren, and 20 guests on Christmas Day 1998. But here we were. "Do you remember me, Harold?" I asked, watching his eyes search for recognition. "Should I?" He frowned, clearly annoyed at having to deal with me instead of Jordan directly. "Christmas 1998. Your daughter Rebecca was pregnant with your first grandchild. I had been married to her for 2 years." I saw the exact moment when the memory came back. His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed in suspicion. "You," he whispered. "Me." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The black man you kicked out of your house on Christmas Eve because I had no place in the Whitman family." Harold quickly composed himself, returning to his mask of ruthless businessman. "That was a long time ago. We're here to discuss business." "We are indeed." I opened my executive briefcase. "Then let's talk about how Jordan gained access to these patents you mention." "He stole them, obviously. You probably helped him, being his father." I let the silence hang for a moment. Harold had always been impatient, always needing to fill the empty spaces with his own voice. It was a weakness I had noticed decades ago. "Jordan didn't steal anything, Harold. He bought those patents. Legally. With complete documentation and official transfer of ownership." "Impossible. Those patents are worth $3 million. I know." I took the documents out of the briefcase. "Because I sold them to him myself. Last year." Harold's face drained of color. Where did you get $3 million for medical technology patents?" I finished the question. "It's an interesting story, Harold. It has to do with that Christmas Eve when you decided I wasn't good enough for your family." He shook his head violently. "You're bluffing. There's no way someone like you could have access to that kind of technology." There it was. The same prejudice, carefully disguised, but still present after 25 years. "Someone like me?" I asked softly. "A black man? Is that what you were trying not to say?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to. You never did." I stood up, picking up the papers. "But you know what I've discovered in these 25 years, Harold? You completely underestimated who I was. And now you're going to pay for it." He tried to protest, but I was already walking toward the door. "Wait. We're not done." "Oh, we are." I stopped at the door, without turning around. 25 years ago, you told me I would never be part of the Whitman family. That I should accept my place. You were right about one thing." "What?" "I never wanted to be part of your family. But my son is a Whitman by blood. And you just threatened to destroy his future." I finally turned around, and Harold saw something in my eyes that made him recoil in his chair. "Now let me tell you exactly who I became after you kicked me out that night. And why threatening Jordan was the biggest mistake of your life. If you're wondering how a man rejected because of prejudice managed to turn the tables on those who humiliated him, don't miss the next chapter of this story. It's worth subscribing to the channel to find out how true justice sometimes takes decades to arrive, but when it does, it is absolute. What Harold didn't know was that Christmas night didn't destroy me. It forged me. And now, 25 years later, he was about to find out exactly what he had created when he decided I wasn't worthy of his family. 25 years. A quarter of a century since that night that changed everything. "That thing shouldn't be here," Harold had whispered to his wife during Christmas dinner in 1998, thinking I wouldn't hear. But I did hear. Rebecca was 6 months pregnant with our first child, and I was holding her hand under the table when her father's words hit me like a punch in the stomach. We were at the Whitman Mansion in Lake Forest, a $3 million estate where every object screamed inherited wealth. Imported crystal chandeliers, authentic Persian rugs, and family portraits dating back 4 generations of successful white businessmen. And there I was, Demetrius Johnson, son of a Detroit mechanic and a nurse, wearing the only decent suit I owned, trying to prove I deserved to be at that table. "Dad, can you stop?" Rebecca had murmured, squeezing my hand tighter. "Stop what, dear?" Harold cut the turkey with precise movements, each slice perfectly uniform. "I'm just observing that certain people don't understand our family values." His wife, Margaret, didn't even look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on her plate as if my presence were a stain on her fine china. "Demetrius works 60 hours a week at the engineering firm," Rebecca tried to defend him. "He just got promoted to project supervisor." "Supervisor," Harold repeated the word as if it were an insult. "At a company we don't even know will last the next quarter." That burned. I rose calmly from the table, looking him straight in the eye. "Mr. Whitman, if there's something you'd like to say, you can say it directly to me." The silence in the dining room became suffocating. Rebecca's uncles, aunts, and cousins stopped eating. Even the children fell quiet, sensing the tension in the air. Harold put his fork down on his plate, wiped his mouth with his linen napkin, and slowly stood up. At 52, he was an imposing man, accustomed to dominating any room he entered. "Very well," he said, walking to the head of the table. "Since you insist on forcing this conversation." "Harold, no," Margaret whispered, but he silenced her with a gesture. "Demetrius, you seem like a hard-working young man. But let's be realistic about the situation." He crossed his arms, assuming the posture of a CEO at a layoff meeting. "My daughter is carrying the future heir to the Whitman family. A child who will grow up with privileges, opportunities, and responsibilities that you simply cannot comprehend." "Dad!" Rebecca stood up, but Harold continued as if she hadn't spoken. "This marriage was a mistake. Rebecca was going through a rebellious phase, and you took advantage of her vulnerability." His voice grew colder with each word. "But phases pass. And when she regains her senses, she'll realize that building a family with someone like you would drastically limit our grandson's possibilities." "Someone like you." He couldn't even say the words, but everyone in the room understood perfectly what he meant. "So you're suggesting that I divorce your daughter?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the anger boiling inside me. "I'm suggesting that you be realistic about your place in this world." Harold walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered gardens. "The Whitmans have built an empire over generations. Property, investments, political connections that open doors to opportunities people like you can only dream of." "People like me," I repeated. "Yes." He turned around, and for the first time that night, he was completely direct. "Poor black people from Detroit who think a college degree and a mediocre job make them suitable for our family." The sound Rebecca made was like she had been slapped. Tears began to roll down her face. "Dad, how can you?" "I'm protecting my grandson's future." Harold exploded. "You think I don't know how these things work? In 10 years, when the novelty wears off, Rebecca will realize she's limited her entire life for a teenage whim. And my grandson will grow up torn between two worlds, belonging completely to neither." Margaret finally spoke, her voice as cold as the December wind outside. "Demetrius, dear," she said, and even the way she pronounced my name sounded condescending. "Surely you must see that this is for the best. For Rebecca, for the child, even for you." "How so, ma'am?" "Well, you're young, educated. I'm sure you'll find a girl more suitable. Someone who shares your background." Suitable. Background. Each word was a polite and precise stab. "What about my son?" I asked, looking directly at Harold. "My grandson will have every opportunity the Whitman name can offer. Education at the best schools, connections that will ensure his success, a future without the complications your presence would create." Rebecca was sobbing now, one hand on her belly, the other covering her face. "Demetrius, let's go," she begged. "Please, let's just go." But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to hear everything, to fully understand what I was fighting against. What if I don't agree? I asked. Harold smiled. It was the cruelest smile I've ever seen in my entire life. Then you'll find out how small the world is when the right people decide you shouldn't be in it. He returned to his chair, cut another piece of turkey. Your engineering firm? The owner, Thomas Bradley, has been a member of the same golf club as me for 15 years. Your career prospects in Chicago? Well, let's just say our family has connections at every major firm in the city. What he was doing was elegant blackmail, wrapped in veiled threats and aristocratic smiles. Dad, stop. Rebecca cried. I love Demetrius. I love our baby. Love, Harold pronounced the word as if it were a childhood disease. Rebecca, dear, you're 22 years old. You think you know what love is because this boy was the first to give you serious attention. But true love is building a life with someone who can offer security, stability, a future without unnecessary obstacles. He paused, looking directly at me. Unnecessary obstacles like the racial prejudice my grandson will face in every school, every club, every business opportunity for the rest of his life. That was when I understood. Harold Whitman wasn't just a prejudiced man. He was a cold strategist who used his wealth and connections as surgical weapons against anything that threatened his control. And on that Christmas night in 1998, I was the threat. Demetrius, Margaret said softly, there is a solution that would benefit everyone. She slid a sealed envelope across the table to me. Inside is information about an excellent job in Seattle. Very well paid, with fantastic benefits. And a relocation bonus that would make your move comfortable. I took the envelope without opening it. What about Rebecca? Rebecca will remain here, where she can receive proper care during her pregnancy. Where our family can support her through this difficult phase. You're trying to buy me off to abandon my pregnant wife on Christmas, I said slowly, still processing the sheer audacity of what they were proposing. We're offering you a future, Harold corrected. Because what you have here is not sustainable. It will end eventually, Demetrius. The only question is whether it will end with dignity or destruction. Rebecca rose from the table, tears now falling freely. I choose Demetrius, she said firmly. I choose our baby. I choose our family. Harold sighed as if she were a child throwing a tantrum. Then choose hardship, dear. For yourself, for him, and especially for my grandson. He looked at me one last time. This conversation ends here. But the offer remains on the table for exactly 1 week. I took the envelope and put it in my jacket pocket without opening it. Mr. Whitman, your daughter is my wife. The baby is my son. And no amount of money will change that. We'll see, he said simply. We left that house that night, Rebecca crying in the passenger seat of my used Ford, while I drove through the snow-covered streets wondering if I would have enough courage to fight a man who owned half of Chicago. What Harold didn't know was that night didn't break me. It forged me. And over the next 25 years, every humiliation, every closed door, every no I received because of my last name or the color of my skin fueled a determination that Harold Whitman was about to discover in all its magnitude. Because my son Jordan didn't just survive the Whitman's prejudice. He thrived in spite of them. And now Harold needed what Jordan had built. But to understand how we got here, you need to know what happened after that night. How a young black engineer turned insults into fuel and built something that would make Harold Whitman beg for a partnership he never imagined he would need. A week after Christmas, Harold kept his promise. I'm sorry to inform you, Demetrius, said Thomas Bradley, my boss at the engineering firm, avoiding eye contact. But we're going to have to make some cuts to the staff. Unfortunately, your position has been eliminated. I was sitting in his office, still processing the words, when he slid an envelope across the table. 2 weeks severance. Sorry, man. You know how the market is. I knew exactly how the market was. And I knew that Harold Whitman had called every engineering firm in Chicago, using his influence to ensure that none of them would hire me. Rebecca was at home when I arrived, organizing the nursery for the baby due in 3 months. She looked at my face and knew immediately. They fired you, she said. It wasn't a question. Your father is very efficient. She sat down heavily in the nursing chair we had bought with such enthusiasm just 2 weeks earlier. Demetrius, maybe we should consider. Consider what? Moving to Seattle? Accepting that your father was right. It's not about him being right, she exploded. It's about survival. We have a baby on the way, and now we have no income. It was the first of many screams that would fill our small apartment in the months to come. Harold had calculated everything perfectly. Without a job, I couldn't pay the rent. Without professional references, I couldn't get another job. And a pregnant wife facing extreme financial pressure would begin to question her choices. For 2 months, I tried to find work. I sent out resumes, went to interviews, made it to the final stages of selection processes. Then, invariably, I would receive a polite call, "We've decided to go with another candidate." Rebecca started crying every night. Not just because of the pregnancy, but because of the stress of watching our financial world collapse. "My parents called me," she said one afternoon after another failed interview. "They want to help us." "On what terms?" "Just that we consider all options." Translation: that I accept the Seattle offer and disappear from her life. That's when I met Marcus Thompson. I was in the park on the same bench where Elena had found me years before, trying to process whether I should accept defeat, when an older black man approached me. "You look like someone who's fighting the system," he said, sitting down next to me without asking permission. Marcus was in his 50s, with gray hair and the look of someone who had fought his own battles. I later learned that he was one of the only successful black entrepreneurs in Chicago, the owner of a small technology consulting firm. "Harold Whitman blacklisted you," Marcus said bluntly. "Do you know him?" "I know men like him. Rich, white, used to controlling narratives." Marcus laughed bitterly. "I was young and naive once, too. I thought competence would overcome prejudice. And does it? Only when you stop playing their game and create your own rules." Marcus offered me something no traditional company would, a job in tech consulting, working with small businesses that big firms ignored. "I can't pay you much at first," he admitted. "But I can teach you to build something Harold Whitman can never destroy." "What's that?" "Your own company. Your own kingdom. Your own rules." Rebecca didn't understand at first. "Tech consulting? Demetrius, you're a civil engineer, not a computer expert." "I can learn." "And abandon all your construction experience?" What she didn't realize was that construction and technology weren't as far apart as they seemed. Both involved meticulous planning, solving complex problems, and building lasting structures. Marcus taught me more than programming and systems. He taught me strategy. "Harold Whitman used connections to isolate you," he explained during our first project. "But connections work both ways. And there are networks he will never access." Marcus introduced me to other Black, Latino, and Asian entrepreneurs. People who had built thriving businesses outside of traditional circles of white power. A community invisible to men like Harold, but real and powerful nonetheless. Jordan was born in March 1999, 3 months after I was fired. When I held my son for the first time, I made a decision that would change everything. "This boy will never feel small in the presence of men like Harold Whitman," I told Rebecca at the hospital. "Demetrius." No, my voice came out firmer than I intended. His father thought he could break me. That he could use power and money to make me disappear. He was wrong. Over the next 2 years, while Rebecca focused on being a mother, I focused on learning. Programming, systems design, industrial automation. Marcus gave me increasingly complex projects, and I discovered I had a natural talent for solving technological problems. More importantly, I discovered that small businesses, especially those owned by non-white entrepreneurs, were desperate for affordable technological solutions that large consulting firms charged fortunes to implement. "You're creating a niche," Marcus observed, reviewing my financial reports in 2001. "High-quality solutions for companies that the establishment ignores. And it works." He smiled. "You've made more in the last 6 months than you did at the engineering firm." That's when I began to understand what Marcus had been trying to teach me. Harold Whitman had forced me out of his playing field. But I had discovered that there was an entirely different game going on, with different rules and opportunities that men like him didn't even know existed. In 2003, Rebecca finally understood what was happening. "You're making more money than my father offered you to leave," she said, looking at our tax return. "It's the beginning." "Of what?" "Of proving him wrong about everything." Jordan was 4 years old and already showing signs of the extraordinary intelligence that would define his life. He took toys apart to understand how they worked, asked questions about computer systems I was installing, absorbed information like a sponge. "Daddy, why don't we visit Grandpa and Grandma Whitman?" he asked one day. Rebecca and I exchanged glances. We had managed to avoid this conversation, but Jordan was growing up and noticing differences between our family and those of his friends. "Because sometimes adults make choices that hurt people," I replied carefully. "And when that happens, we need to create our own family." "With whom?" "With people who love us for who we are, not for what we appear to be." It was that night that I made my final decision. Harold Whitman had tried to destroy me because he believed that men like me could not threaten men like him. That our presence in his family would diminish his status, limit Jordan's opportunities, create problems he couldn't solve with money and connections. I would prove him wrong. Not just by surviving, but by thriving. Not just by being successful, but by being indispensable. And one day, when Harold Whitman needed something only I could provide, he would discover the real price of underestimating a black man determined to prove his worth. Marcus had taught me the most important rule of business: patience is power. And revenge served cold tastes much sweeter. What Harold didn't know was that every door he slammed in my face forced me to find windows he didn't even know existed. And behind those windows, I built an empire that would soon become essential to the very world he controlled. But there were still 20 years to go before our reunion at that law firm. 20 years of growth, planning, and preparation for the moment when our paths would cross again. And when that happened, I would be ready. Over the next 5 years, while Harold Whitman believed he had eliminated the threat to his family, I was building something he could never have imagined: a parallel empire growing in the shadows of the traditional corporate world. Marcus taught me that real power doesn't come from inherited connections, but from becoming indispensable. "Find problems that only you can solve," he said, "and you'll never be expendable again." By 2005, my technology consulting firm had grown to 15 employees. We weren't big, but we were efficient. We specialized in industrial automation for medium-sized companies, those too big for generic solutions but too small to interest the big consulting firms. That's when I discovered that Harold had made his first strategic mistake. "Whitman Industries is outsourcing all of its technology development," Marcus observed, showing me an article in the Chicago Business Journal. "They're focusing solely on manufacturing and sales." I studied his decision carefully. Harold was eliminating the R&D department to cut costs, selling patents he considered non-essential to finance international expansion. "Non-essential," I muttered, reading the list of patents that would be available at next month's public auction. Marcus smiled. "Do you recognize anything there?" I recognized everything. Medical automation systems, communication protocols between hospital equipment, computer-assisted diagnostic algorithms. Harold was selling the future of medicine because he didn't understand that manufacturing without innovation was a business with an expiration date. "How many of these patents can you evaluate?" Marcus asked. "All of them. And I know exactly how to make them valuable." At that auction in November 2005, I bought my first million in patents for $200,000. Harold didn't even show up. He delegated the sale to a subordinate because he considered the event irrelevant to core operations. Irrelevant. The word that would define his downfall. Jordan was 6 years old when I started explaining my work to him. Not the technical details, but the philosophy behind each decision. "Dad, why do you buy things that other people don't want?" he asked, playing with one of the medical prototypes in my home workshop. "Because sometimes people don't know the value of what they have, son. They only see the present. I see the future." "And what do you see in the future?" "That one day, these things that nobody wants will be essential. And when that happens, those who own them will have the power to choose who can use them." Jordan absorbed every word. He already showed extraordinary aptitude for math and science, but more importantly, he demonstrated the same strategic patience that I was developing. In 2008, when the financial crisis devastated Chicago, my company not only survived but thrived. While large corporations cut back on technology investments, smaller companies desperately needed efficient solutions to remain competitive. That's when Harold made his second mistake. He tried to buy me out. "Mr. Johnson," his assistant said on the phone, "Mr. Whitman would like to discuss a possible acquisition of your company." I laughed. I really laughed. Tell Mr. Whitman that my company is not for sale. But I appreciate the interest. Harold didn't understand that it wasn't my company he needed. It was the patents. And those, I would never sell to him. Over the next few years, I established a routine that would become my secret weapon: complete monitoring of everything related to Whitman Industries. Quarterly financial reports, leadership changes, government contracts, market trends. I knew more about his company than many internal employees. I saw when they lost the contract with the largest hospital in Chicago due to technological incompatibility. I saw when the competition surpassed them in medical innovation. I saw when Harold began to realize that he had sold the company's future in 2005. Jordan grew up watching my meticulous planning. At 15, he already understood corporate strategy better than most executives. "Dad, do you really want me to be a doctor?" he asked during dinner in 2014. "I want you to be whatever you choose. But medicine is power over life and death. And power, son, is the only language that men like Harold Whitman truly understand." Do you still think about him? Every day. Not with anger, but with purpose. Jordan was accepted into Harvard at 16. Not because of privilege or family connections, but because of pure excellence. While Harold had tried to break me by arguing that I would limit my son's opportunities, Jordan was surpassing limits that even the children of multimillionaires rarely achieved. The real irony? Jordan chose to specialize in cardiology because he knew it was the medical field where our patented devices would be most revolutionary. In 2019, when Jordan became the youngest chief surgeon in Chicago's history, Harold finally understood his situation. Whitman Industries was technologically outdated. Hospitals demanded smart, integrated equipment capable of communicating with each other to optimize treatments. Exactly the kind of technology Harold had sold as non-essential 14 years earlier. If you're wondering how someone plans revenge for 2 decades while staying focused on building an empire, it's because you understand that true justice isn't emotional, it's strategic. The call that changed everything came in March 2023. "Mr. Johnson, this is David Chun, Director of Development at Whitman Industries. We'd like to discuss a technology partnership." "What kind of partnership?" "Licensing of some medical patents we believe you own. Our customers are demanding compatibility with more advanced systems." Compatibility. The word Harold had ignored for decades was finally taking its toll. "Send me a list of the specific technologies you need," I replied calmly. "We'll evaluate the possibilities." When the list arrived, it was like looking at an inventory of every patent Harold had sold in 2005. Each item represented a feature he now desperately needed to keep Whitman Industries relevant. I called Jordan that night. "Son, the time has come." "For what, Dad?" "To show Harold Whitman what happens when someone underestimates the future." The final plan was in motion. Harold had spent 25 years believing he had eliminated me as a threat. In fact, he had created his own dependence on the technologies I controlled. Now he needed me. And I was about to collect every penny of humiliation I had suffered on that Christmas night in 1998. But first, Harold would do something that would give me the perfect excuse for a definitive refusal. He would try to intimidate my son. The moment I had been waiting for a quarter of a century was finally coming. And Harold Whitman would discover that some decisions have consequences that take decades to manifest, but when they do, they are absolutely devastating. 2 weeks later, Harold Whitman did exactly what I expected. He escalated the situation. The subpoena arrived on a Monday morning. Jordan was being sued for $3 million for misuse of Whitman Industries' intellectual property. Harold had hired the most aggressive law firm in Chicago to destroy my son. "Dad, they're claiming I stole the patents," Jordan called me, his voice tense for the first time in years. "They say I have suspicious connections to their proprietary technologies." "Suspicious connections?" I laughed softly. "Son, it's time you found out exactly how suspicious those connections are." We scheduled a meeting at Harold's lawyer's office for that afternoon. When we arrived, Harold was seated at the head of the conference table like a king on his throne, flanked by 3 lawyers and a private investigator. "Dr. Harrison," Harold said formally, avoiding looking at me. "Thank you for coming to discuss this delicate situation." Jordan sat directly across from him. "Mr. Whitman, I don't understand why you're suing over medical equipment that my father legitimately developed." "Your father?" Harold finally looked at me, genuine confusion in his eyes. "I thought you were an orphan." The silence in the room became thick as lead. "I'm sorry," Jordan said slowly, "you don't know who my father is?" Harold shook his head, irritated. "Why would that matter? We're here to discuss stolen intellectual property." Jordan looked at me, then back at Harold. "My father is Demetrius Johnson, your former son-in-law." The color drained from Harold's face like water from a leaky bathtub. "Impossible," he whispered. "Rebecca remarried years ago. To a doctor. She told me." "Rebecca never remarried, Harold," I interrupted calmly. "She changed our last name to Mitchell when Jordan entered medical school. To protect him from men like you." Harold's lawyers exchanged confused glances. The investigator began frantically leafing through his papers. "You," Harold pointed at me with a trembling finger. But how? How did a black man from Detroit get $3 million worth of patents?" I completed his question. "It's an interesting story." I opened my briefcase and distributed copies of documents across the table. "These are the patents you sold in 2005. Every single one of them. I bought them at public auction for $200,000 because you deemed them non-essential to core operations." Harold's lead attorney picked up the documents, his eyes widening with each page. "Harold," he whispered, "these are actually the patents your company needs for the new hospital contracts." "That's impossible." Harold exploded. "How did he know that you would sell your company's future for quick cash?" I smiled. "Because I've been watching you for 25 years. Every move, every decision, every strategic mistake." I placed another set of documents on the table. "These are Whitman Industries' quarterly financial analyses since 1998. Your public reports, filed with the SEC. Do you know what they show?" Harold was silent now, his eyes fixed on the papers as if they might disappear by force of will. "They show that you have 24 months before complete bankruptcy if you don't get the hospital technology modernization contracts." My voice remained perfectly calm. "Contracts that require exactly the technologies you sold 18 years ago." "You planned this," Harold whispered. "All of it." "I planned to survive what you did to me. I planned to thrive despite your attempt to destroy me. I planned to raise a son who would exceed all the limits you said he would face." I leaned forward. "But to destroy you specifically? Harold, you did that yourself." Jordan watched the exchange with growing fascination. "Dad, did you really wait 25 years? "I didn't wait, son. I built. Every year that passed, every patent I bought, every technology one developed, was a brick in the foundation of the future your grandfather said you would never have." The private investigator whispered something to the lead attorney, who paled. "Mr. Whitman," the attorney said hesitantly, "my team just confirmed it. All of the patents in question were legitimately purchased by Mr. Johnson at public auction. There is no legal basis for the lawsuit." "Furthermore," I continued, pulling out another document, "Jordan did not use stolen property. He used property that I sold to him for a symbolic $1 last year, officially transferring all rights." Harold was breathing heavily now. "You can't do that. These technologies, my company needs them." "It does," I agreed. "And I would be willing to license them. For a fair price." "How much?" I smiled for the first time in that meeting. $5 million. Per year. With exclusivity clauses that prevent you from developing competitive technologies. That's extortion. That's business, Harold. You taught me that when you tried to buy me out for $200,000 in 1998. The lead attorney whispered something in Harold's ear, and he shook his head violently. "There's more," I continued. "Jordan requires a public apology for defamation. And you will pay all of his legal fees. And if I refuse? Then you'll go bankrupt in 2 years, and I'll sell the patents to your competitors. Particularly interesting are the German and Japanese companies that have been approaching me." Harold looked around the table, seeking support that wasn't there. His own lawyers were whispering among themselves, clearly advising acceptance. "How?" Harold asked, his voice broken. "How did you know I would need those patents?" "Because I've studied you, Harold. For a quarter of a century. I know you make decisions based on pride, not strategy. I know you dismiss what you don't understand. And I know you never imagined that the young black man you expelled would become indispensable to your survival. I stood up, Jordan doing the same. You have 72 hours to decide, Harold. After that, the offer expires and the patents go to the highest bidder. We walked toward the door when Harold shouted, "Wait. Why? Why not just destroy me completely?" I stopped at the door, without turning around. Because destruction is what you would do, Harold. I choose justice. You will learn to live in a world where you respect people you once despised. And you will pay fairly for the privilege. Jordan was silent in the elevator until we reached the parking lot. Dad, that was amazing. But what happens if he refuses? I smiled, placing my hand on my brilliant son's shoulder. He can't refuse, Jordan. And even if he could, I've already won. I've proven that the 25-year-old he tried to break has become indispensable to the world he built. I proved that you surpassed every limit he said you would face. I looked up at the skyscraper where Harold was, probably still trying to process how the game had turned so completely. But more importantly, I proved that true family isn't about blood or last names. It's about choosing to love and support each other, even when the whole world says you shouldn't. Jordan's phone rang. It was Rebecca. Mom? Yes, we just left the meeting. You'll want to sit down for this story. As Jordan told his mother about the afternoon's events, I thought about how many years I had waited for this moment. Not the revenge itself, but the final proof that Harold Whitman had been wrong about everything. Wrong about me. Wrong about Jordan. Wrong about what family really means. And now he would have the rest of his life to reflect on those mistakes while paying $5 million a year for the privilege of using technologies created by the man he tried to destroy on Christmas 1998. The irony was sweeter than any Christmas dessert Margaret Whitman had ever served. 72 hours later, Harold was back at the lawyer's office. This time, he came alone. No lawyers, no private investigator, no characteristic arrogance. Just a 73-year-old man facing the consequences of decisions made in a moment of blind pride. I accept the terms, he said simply, his voice almost a whisper. I signed the licensing agreement in front of him. $5 million annually for an indefinite period. Exclusivity clauses that prevented any competitive development. And the public apology that would be published in the Chicago Tribune the following Tuesday. Harold, I said when we were done, you always asked why I didn't seek to destroy you completely. He looked at me, waiting. Because destruction is temporary. Humiliation is forgotten. But dependence lasts forever. I walked to the office window, looking out at the city where it had all begun 25 years earlier. Now, every time your company closes a deal, every time it innovates, every time it grows, it will be using technology that I created. Technology developed by the black man you tried to erase from your family's history. Harold remained silent. And Jordan? My son became exactly what you said he would never be. Not in spite of the prejudice he faced, but because of the strength it gave him. A week later, Rebecca called me for the first time in 15 years. Demetrius, I read the article in the newspaper. About what my father did to you, to Jordan. I didn't know. You knew, Rebecca. But you chose to believe the more comfortable version of the story. There was silence on the line. Can I see you? In person. We met at the same cafe we used to go to when we were young and naive enough to believe that love would conquer all. He's ruined, she said of Harold. Financially, socially. His golf club friends stopped talking to him after the article. And how do you feel about that? Relieved, she replied honestly. Finally, someone held him accountable for his actions. We spent 2 hours talking. About Jordan, about our separate lives, about paths that could have been different if Harold hadn't interfered. Do you forgive me? She asked before we said goodbye. I forgave him a long time ago, Rebecca. Anger is a poison you drink hoping the other person will die. Jordan graduated in cardiology the following year, becoming the most respected surgeon of his generation. Not because of the Whitman surname, which he never used, but because of the Mitchell we chose when we decided that family is something you build, not something you inherit. At graduation, Rebecca was in the front row. Harold was not invited. During his valedictory speech, Jordan said something that perfectly summed up our journey. My father taught me that success is not about proving others wrong about you. It's about proving yourself right. 5 years have passed since that meeting at the law firm. Harold continues to pay the $5 million a year, his company totally dependent on my patents to survive. Jordan opened his own clinic, specializing in heart surgery for underserved communities. He uses the same life-saving technologies found in elite hospitals to give hope to those who would never have access to that level of medical care. And me? I continue to innovate, create, and build the future that Harold said I could never achieve. Last week, we received an offer from Whitman Industries to buy us out for $15 million. I rejected it without hesitation. Not because I hate Harold, but because I prefer to maintain the dependency that reminds him daily of the price of underestimating people. If this story touched you, showing that patience and planning always win out over impulse and prejudice, subscribe to the channel. We have many other stories of people who turned humiliation into fuel for success. The last time I saw Harold was at the opening of Jordan's clinic. He was outside, watching through the window as the grandson he tried to limit was now saving lives that other doctors considered lost. Our eyes met through the glass. He waved shyly. I waved back. Because in the end, the greatest revenge wasn't destroying him. It was proving him wrong about everything, while building something greater than his worst fears could ever imagine.